Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the bedroom studio. I am your man in Japan, Jay Contra, and I'm here with a January Q&A. I'd like to do Q&As about once a month. I certainly have enough questions. Thank you very much for those, by the way. These questions are actually from a long time ago. I've been gathering all of the questions you guys have been leaving me in comments on videos. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer, again, just leave a comment on this or any of the other videos that I make, and I'll try and answer it as soon as I can. If I do this once a month, maybe I'll be able to catch up through the backlog. But before I continue rambling, here we go with some questions. What sort of PS3 titles do you find in the junk section nowadays? So in the junk section in Heartoff, there are games that are sold without a guarantee, meaning you buy it, you can't take it back. Now, that doesn't mean that if you bought, say, for example, a PS3 game, that it's not going to work. Most likely, it's going to work. And so the PS3 games that you find in the junk section of a Heartoff are usually the overstock or the overflow, because they really don't want 20 copies of FIFA 2012 laying around, or whatever, winning 11, I think, is one of the bigger ones, especially here in Japan. So what you'll find in terms of PS3 games in the junk section are usually like the huge, super popular titles, like, not quite Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior. Dragon Quest simply because I don't think there was a Dragon Quest game that came out on the PS3, or mainline title at least. But you would find like a lot of Dragon Quest 8s, you would find a lot of Dragon Quest 7s, 6s for the PlayStation. You'll find those in the junk section. But for PS3, it's going to be your Dynasty Warriors. It's going to be basically any of your sports games, any of your, again, winning 11s. I think they have FIFA here in Japan, especially the Konami sports games. You'll also find a lot of the Gundam games, like the mass printed ones, like the Gundam Breakers, I think was a PS3 game, maybe, or especially the Gundam Musou games. You'll find a lot of those in the junk section. You'll also find a lot of other weird titles, but especially for the PS3, now that I think it's been 3 or 4 years out of print, you'll find a lot more PS3 games in the junk section than you usually did. Like, I remember when I first started seeing it a couple years ago, I was like, oh my God, I'm getting so old. I remember when the PS3 first came out. I even remember when the PS3 was first being rumored. Like, it's like, oh, it's, the PS2 is amazing, but the PS3, it's going to have cell processing technology. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be incredible. And now, you find PS3 games for like $1.20 in the junk section. Absolutely crazy to me. We're not getting any younger, folks. Next question. Now, this was a question specific to a particular video, but basically it's asking, are those shrink wrapped games new in box or resealed? And I actually get this question a few times every once in a while, where you'll see games in used Japanese game shops, even in Akihabara, even to a certain extent in Heartoff, where there are used games, but they have been resealed, not like, in a professional sense, not in a way that it's indistinguishable from an actual sealed game. But what I suspect, or something that I haven't been able to confirm myself, is that games prior to the CD era, so your original, or it really depends on the case. So I believe that Famicom, Super Famicom, N64 games, and probably also Sega Mega Drive games in Japan, I believe those were sold without being sealed. This is actually something I could get to in another video, but I don't think you're going to see a sealed sort of boom collecting in Japanese video games, simply because they didn't exist. Now, I also believe that sealed games, CD-based games or disc-based games, like your PlayStation 1, PS2, maybe GameCube, but I'm not sure about that. I believe those games were sold factory sealed, and including PS3, Wii games, things like that. However, if you find a sealed game in a store and it's actually originally factory sealed, the store will tell you. It will say that it's new, either because they'll put it in the English, or they will also have it in the kanji. If you're unsure, you can always just find a clerk and ask them. And even if you just say like new to them, they'll understand what you're meaning, and they'll probably tell you that no, it's probably not new, just because even at like Geo, at the sort of modern sort of GameStop-y kind of place, they will shrink wrap their games. Even though they're used, Book Off will shrink wrap their games every once in a while. But you can tell very, not easily, but I think with a little bit of practice, a little bit of careful checking, whether a game has been resealed versus whether you're picking it up factory sealed. They're not trying to sell games as new, at the very least. Moving to the next question. You ever seen a 64DD out and about anywhere? How much does it go for? So I haven't seen a 64DD even in Tokyo in a very long time. The last time I saw one in person was maybe a loose 64DD, and it's usually sold with games. Like usually you don't just find a 64DD just by itself. Usually you find it with at least the disc drive and all of like the Mario Artist games and maybe a couple of other games. I want to say the last time I saw it, it was like $600 for a loose version. I have seen one complete in box for $1,000, but that was a few years ago, and I think the price on that has probably dramatically increased. You see the games every once in a while. I think I found that the Doshin the Giant sequel, I think I saw that for like $800. It was really expensive. 64DD collecting, not only like, I remember when I first came to Japan, I really wanted to collect the N64. It ended up taking me 7.5 years to complete my collection. And by the end of it, I just hated the N64 so much that I ended up I really don't want to buy a DD. I'd much rather buy a Neo Geo. Next question. Are there games in English and are they cheap? So every once in a while, I will find a Super Nintendo or an original Nintendo game, and I mean, the North American release. They're not very cheap. They can actually tend to be very expensive. I did one time, the only real like massive insane deal I've ever found in Japan was when I found a copy of Conker's Bad Fur Day for the N64. It was the American release. I found it for like $30 loose. And I'm assuming that's because someone came over from the US or from Canada. They brought their collection with them, or their contemporary collection with them. They didn't really feel like bringing it back with them, so they just took it to a used video game store and sold it. You see that every once in a while. And even in Tokyo, if you go to some Akihabara locations, especially Trader has a bunch of import games that it's selling new. I'm assuming it's to expats who are working here in Japan. There doesn't seem to be that huge of an English or a foreign collecting scene here in Japan. It exists, but you're not going to find the game super cheap. Every once in a while, maybe. Next question. What camera are you using? What camera am I using? So right now I'm using my recently purchased iPhone 11 to film this vlog. When I'm shooting shop videos, or when I'm taking you through a Heartoff or through a used video game store here in Japan, I'm using an E4K. I bought that last year. I want to say it was like $100. The microphone is really bad on it. The video quality is not great. The motion stabilization is also not very good. So I'm looking to maybe upgrade in the future. I'm looking at like some GoPros. The E4K is great if you want a $100 action camera. On previous vlogs, basically anything that I filmed before January of 2020, I was using a Sony NEX5R that I bought like 7 years ago. I'm looking also to upgrade that as well, just because it can't do 4K. It can't even do 60 FPS 1080p. And it also overheats after filming for like 18 minutes, which is why I'm using the iPhone now to film this. So next question, what about Osaka? I'm there soon for one day. Would you recommend any shops? Osaka is, first of all, it's a great video. It's a great video. Osaka is a great city to visit just because Osaka is a weird place, because I want to say it's a great town. It's a great town in and of itself just to be in. It's got some good shopping, and in terms of video games, you can go to, I want to say Den Town. I haven't been there in a couple years. Den Town is basically just this long street it's got Super Potato, it's got an A2 that has a lot of cool used games there at really good prices. It's got a bunch of cooler, littler shops around that not only carry video games, but they'll also have cool just otaku, anime memorabilia, figures, cards, all that cool stuff. If you're in Osaka only for a day, I'd recommend only spending half a day in Den Town doing that, but do yourself a favor, go to Dotonbori, go to the canal, see all the cool stuff there. Den Town's just a short walk away. See that, and also you're probably going to want to spend more time going to like Kobe, going to Kyoto, going to Nara. If you're in Osaka just looking for video games, you might be a bit disappointed, but there is some really cool stuff there. There is a Mandarake in Nanba, I think. It's not that great. It doesn't have a lot of video games. Check out the Super Potatoes. Actually, Super Potato, I think, is originally from the Kansai area. It's originally from Osaka, so there's actually a bunch of locations. The RetroCon has some very high prices, but there's probably a deal in there somewhere. Next question. Do you know of any hard-off/book off around the Tokyo area that doesn't have inflated tourist prices? So I can tell you from personal experience that the book off in Yokohama has some great retro games there at very good prices. I think they had some very cheap Game Boy consoles that I think were I found a Game Boy Color for like 3,000 yen. That's going for like 6,000, 7,000 in Akihabara. Most of the hard offs, you can actually find a bunch of hard offs in Kawasaki. I think that's where I found some good prices on GameCube games. So you're really in hard offs in the general Tokyo area. I don't think you'll be super disappointed, but it's going to mean some extra train rides. So just keep that in mind. I've heard the book offs, or there's some good places in Shinjuku that actually have some good prices, but I just haven't been able to get out there yet. Next question. Just a quick question. Is it common in Japan to have knockoffs of Famicom games? No, I don't think so. Now that I think about it, I've seen knockoff Famicoms. I've seen those sort of the Famiclones that came out in the 90s and the 2000s. Even those older ones. And then, of course, you've got the newer ones that have been released recently. Because when you think about it, an AV Famicom, man, a while ago, it was going for $150, $200 in Akihabara. You'd be lucky to find it outside of Tokyo for maybe $70, $80 loose. And so you had lots of Famiclones because you needed to be able to plug in your Famicom into a proper television. And that could be really hard to find. Famiclones, maybe $20, $30. As for knockoff Famicom games, I don't know if I've ever actually seen one. Maybe in Akihabara they have them, but not that I've actually seen. I've seen a lot of the sort of unlicensed games, like the Super Mario Brothers or something like that. That weird Peach game that came out that someone released for the Famicom. A couple of other like sort of the sexy Bobble games. I've seen those, and they've been quite expensive. But no, not a knockoff Famicom game. Not a cartridge itself. Next question. Hey man, I'm dying to get a hold of a Famicom or Super Famicom, but the prices here in the USA are ridiculous. What's the cheapest you can usually find one in Japan? So a Famicom, if we're talking the original Famicom, that's just the sort of the coax input that I think I guess maybe you can use in America. Those will run, if you find it at a hard off, if you're lucky, you'll find one in the junk for $10. If you're looking for a complete in-box Famicom, we're talking original Famicom, like 1983 Famicom, not the first edition. So there is a first edition Famicom that has square buttons. Those can easily go for like $300, $400. I don't even want to know what they cost if they're complete in box. If it's the regular one with the circle buttons that got produced for like 5-10 years, that's, I want to say, low end $40 if you find it at a hard off. If you find it in Akihabara, it's going to be $100 probably, maybe even slightly cheaper. Super Potato probably has it for like $60. You can also find those original Famicoms that have been AV modded. Those usually are about $100 in Akihabara. I've not really seen them in hard offs. As for the AV Famicom, this is actually a great time to buy an AV Famicom because even at Mandarake, I've been seeing loose ones for like 80, 90 bucks. You should probably find them for like 60 or 70 at a Heartoff. If you're looking complete in-box, I wouldn't pay over 100 bucks for a complete in-box AV Famicom. So that's just the prices off the top of my head. As for the Super Famicoms, I think I just saw them at Super Potato for, I want to say like 4,000, anywhere between 4,000 and 5,000 yen. You can find sort of a complete loose one that's got the cables and a controller at a Heartoff. 4,000 would be the upper limit. Complete in-box Super Famicoms can vary pretty wildly. I remember at a Heartoff near where I used to live, those could go, I think, like $100 to $200 for some reason. A reasonable rate, I think, would be anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 yen, depending on condition, for a complete in-box Super Famicom. Here in Tokyo, in Akihabara, I wouldn't pay over 8,000 for a Super Famicom here in Japan, or in Akihabara specifically. Next question. Hey, I'll be living in Tokyo, and I was wondering what you would say are the best Heartoffs in Tokyo. I went to the one in Akihabara and the one in Shimo Kitazawa. In my experience, I would say, yeah, like I said before, the ones in the Heartoffs in Kawasaki, I remember finding some good deals there, picking up some games there. There's actually out in Hachioji, which is a bit of a hike. It's probably going to be maybe an hour and 20-minute train ride out of central Tokyo. Hachioji is in sort of the western part of Tokyo. It's not in Tokyo, like central Tokyo, but it's still in Tokyo, the metropolitan area that is known as Tokyo. That Hachioji, the Heartoff itself, I don't think had games or systems, but it was attached to a much larger book-off Super Bazaar, which had a lot of good retro games at some really great prices. I think I ended up picking up a few games there, but I wanted to say I was there like 5 years ago. If you're in the Tokyo area, I really suggest going to Kanagawa, going to the Heartoffs there that are like south. I was recently, and I'll probably be posting the videos around this time, I was at the Heartoff in Kamakura, and I want to say Fujisawa. Those had some really great games at good prices. And I want to say it was the one at Fujisawa. Might have had some of the best box prices that I've ever seen. Even in not only the Tokyo area, but just in Japan in general. And the selection at Heartoffs in the Tokyo area, including both Saitama and Kanagawa, great selections. Was really impressed, even though the prices were a little bit steeper. Next question. How's the Xbox 360 games out there? Almost non-existent. You will rarely find Xbox 360 games at Heartoff, although you will. And actually the Xbox 360, if you want an Xbox 360 in Japan, now is the time because they're super cheap. You can pick up a complete in-box like an Xbox 360 S for like 50 bucks maybe. Original Xbox 360s are going for like 20, 30 bucks loose, and probably the same if you find one in box. As for the games, I've noticed a significant increase in price on the shooters for the Xbox 360. I knew I should have been buying those years ago. I just never got around to it, and boy, am I going to pay for them, because I think even like Mushihime, I think is pushing like 50, 60 bucks. Even the Doronpachi games, those are going, yeah, again, 50, 60 bucks. And I was seeing those for like $40 a couple of years ago. And there's also a lot of like the even more obscure Xbox 360 shooting games. There's a couple of them that are going above $100. Like, was it like Raiden Aces is going for like $120, $140 at like Mandarake. Other than that, a lot of the games for the Xbox 360 are super cheap because nobody wants them. At least nobody wants them yet. We'll see what happens in 3-4 years. Next question. How would you buy things from the showcase? So if you want to get something out of the showcase and your Japanese vocabulary is very limited, just go up to someone at the counter and just say, "Showcase, please," and they'll know exactly what you're talking about. Because the Japanese for showcases just would be like showcase. So if you just go to someone and you say, "Showcase, please," they'll take you to the showcase. Usually you tell them what you want, they'll pick it out, they'll give it to you to kind of glance over if you want to see what's inside, because sometimes They will shrink wrap the game. They'll open up the shrink wrap for you. They'll show you the manual. You can check the condition on everything. So sometimes I get into like a weird anxious panic when I'm handling something from the showcase. But if you just remain calm, look at everything, they're very open about what you'll be able to look at a particular store. And if it's something you're buying from the showcase, it's going to be expensive, so you're going to want to take a look at it. Next question. Oh, and well, another weird thing is that if you are purchasing something from the showcase, maybe make it the last thing you buy, because generally they'll then take you directly to the register and you'll pay for the game there. Maybe they'll hold on to it for you if you're continuing to shop around. I don't think I've ever done that, but just maybe make it the last thing you pick up to make the logistics easier on yourself. Next question. How come there are hardly any Dreamcasts or any type of PC Engine TurboGrafx in the junk section ever? This is something interesting because for a while there was at the Heartoff near where I used to live, there was a PC Engine. I don't think it was a core graphics. It was the one that was like the weird way that you hooked it into your TV. It wasn't the normal AV cables. It was the original PC Engine. There was a junk system in there forever because it was really beaten up. It was complete in box, I think, but it was just really roughed up. The thing about the PC Engine here in Japan is that I don't think it did that well compared to the Famicom or the Super Famicom. So because it didn't do so hot, you'll often find you're not going to find overstock. Whereas when you go to a Heartoff, you might see rows and rows of Super Famicoms and original Famicoms because they don't have room for it on the shelves out on the main show floor. And because if they're even just slightly beat up, it's not worth trying to sell those versus the really good condition Super Famicoms that you've got regularly coming in. Whereas for the PC Engine, you'll be able to sell a loose console no problem, no matter its condition, because they're so sought after. Well, maybe not, in 2020, but even still, they're still collector's items. And I think Heartoffs will be much more forgiving about the condition of a PC Engine as opposed to Super Famicom, which is much more plentiful. The Dreamcast, you don't often see it in the junk section, and I wonder why, if only because, for one, again, it didn't sell that well. And for two, maybe just because it's a sturdier built system. So when I think about the junk sections that I've been through, I've maybe seen a junk Dreamcast every once in a while, but maybe it's just a hardy system, so it didn't break down that often. I couldn't tell you. As for the games, I don't think I've ever seen a PC Engine game in the junk section. Probably because they didn't sell too many of them. Again, it's all based on what people are bringing in, and people just are not bringing in PC Engine stuff. And so you're not going to have that overflow. As for the Dreamcast, you see lots of Dreamcast games in the junk section. And of course, it's going to be a lot of the sports titles, because while they didn't sell a lot of Dreamcast systems in the system's lifespan, they did sell a bunch of games, and so you will find a lot of like the passports or the web browser disc that came with the Dreamcast. You see a lot of those, and you'll see sports games. But other than that, it's just because they weren't that popular, so there isn't the overstock. If I'm saying that for the third time now. Next question. I'm surprised. Is it reasonable to have the price of Nintendo DSs be $5 and $3? Yes, for junk systems. Any Heartoff you go into will probably have a bin that is full of junk Nintendo DS systems and games, because as to a counterpoint to the PC Engine and the Dreamcast experience, the DS was it the best-selling system of all time? I can't remember in terms of actual physical units moved, but we're talking about a system that had millions of systems produced, that had millions of copies of probably had thousands of games that had million copies plus printed. And so you've just got such volume, and the DS, there just is not the nostalgia yet for the DS. Maybe in 5 years, maybe when it hits that 15-year mark. Oh God, are we at the 15-year mark of the DS? Oh no, we might be at it. I'm old. But what you find in the junk section of Heartoff is going to be really based on popularity. Meaning, and the other thing about the junk DSs is that those are the one system that I would be very hesitant to purchase from the junk, simply because it's probably going to be one of the few systems that actually is either not going to work or is going to be so beat up, the condition is just going to be so bad that it just might not be worth picking up because it's going to be dirty. You know, these were systems that were bought primarily by kids, so they're going to have been thrown around. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen DSs that I've picked up that have been like bedazzled and have stickers all over them, which is cool, and you know, you should do whatever you want to the system that you own, but it's not really something that I think a lot of other collectors are actually gonna want to buy, except for that leopard print PS1 that I found. But for the DS, yeah, I think, you know, games, for a lot of the popular games, I really wouldn't spend more than $5 and $10 on them. And especially if you purchase them outside of Heartoff, if you're going to places like Gayo, if you're going to Book Off, you can find, like 99.9% of DS games are below $15, I want to say. Whether they'll stay that at that price point for the next 5-10 years, only time can tell. Next question, let's finish off here on a good one. Olav asks, sorry if I didn't include your name. I think I only started including names after I started doing this seriously. But Olav asks, do they have the same soundtrack in Heartoff, or do you add it in the video? So in my first few videos of visiting Heartoffs, when I was editing things together, I would include the Heartoff theme. But for the last couple years, no, I have not added in the Heartoff theme. They have literally had the same theme playing over that speaker in Heartoffs across the country for, I want to say, at least 5 years, if not for the nearly 8 years that I've lived in Japan. You will go to a Heartoff once in a while that might pipe in music, and it might have different announcements or news that they might put in between the Heartoffs. And they have some different like theme songs that they'll do. You know, they'll have different like songs that they'll try and tell you like how to buy things, how to sell things, how you don't have to worry when you're selling things to Heartoff. But yes, it has been the same. I know I'm going to be on my deathbed, and that's just the one thing that's going to be playing through my head after all those years of going to Heartoff. But yes, to reiterate, there's only been one song that I've ever heard in Heartoff consistently in 8 years, in probably the 50 plus locations that I visited in at least the bottom half of this country, and then also in Hokkaido. It's been the same thing every day. And I feel really bad for the people that have to work there, because unless they have that unique ability to tune it out, you're just going to hear that 9-10 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. And on that note, this has been the January Q&A. If you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, leave me a comment on this video or any other videos, and I'll put it in the bank, and I'll get to it as soon as I can. I've been your man in Japan, Jay Contra, saying thanks for watching, see you next time, and mahalo.